Is anyone here for the CTEC solar application? The only reason I'm asking is we're not doing that, so, okay. Okay. Are we finally ready? Now let's see. We are missing more people than we have alternates for. So, yep. Good evening. We're going to call to order the Tuesday, January 14, 2025 meeting of the Town of South Windsor Planning and Zoning Commission. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we're going to have one more thing. Please silence your cell phones. So we're going to have a public hearing. I'll have the secretary read the public hearing notice.
Notice is hereby given that there will be a public hearing on Tuesday, January 14th, 2025 at 7 p.m. in the council chambers of the South Windsor Town Hall to consider the following. Number one, application 24-44P. This is CTEC Solar LLC. This application has been postponed by the applicant to our next regularly scheduled meeting on January 28th. Number two, application 24-47P, Eagle Auto Collision Center LLC. This is a request for a special exception to table 4.1.1A to allow for a car dealership license to sell new and used automobiles limited to 4 on property located at 1505 John Fitch Boulevard, Industrial Zone. And number three, application to 25-02P, which is McGuire Road Associates, LLC, a request for a 2-year temporary and conditional permit for a residential unit in a commercial building on property located at 37 McGuire Road, RR Zone. Copies of the applications are on file in the office of the town clerk and online at southwindsor-ct.gov. At this hearing, interested persons may be heard. Written comments by the public will be received by mail or email. Persons who may require an accommodation can contact staff at 860-644-2511, extension 2329. Stephen Wagner, Chair, Planning and Zoning Commission.
Thank you. So the way we do a public hearing is we first hear from the applicant, then we will hear from our staff, then we will ask members of the public if they have comments or questions. We don't answer the questions while you're up here talking, but we will eventually address them. And then we get input from the commissioners. So we'll start with application 2447P, Eagle Auto.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Rafael Otero, and speaking for Eagle Auto Collision Center. All right.
Yeah, we'd ask you to also sign in.
Oh, so the reason for us applying for the dealer license is because of the way everything has been changing. I mean, we've been in business there for 7 years, conducting great business there. Just trying to get the opportunity to be able to buy cars at the auction so we can run right back through the auction. So we are not trying to display a dealership outside because we don't have the right proper space for the parking. So we have been working on the parking issue. And if we can get approved for it, all it does is clean up the whole area because we'll be shaving down what I'm doing as far as the collision and the body work and all. I'm trying to transition the business to more of buying cars at the auction that are light-hitted, and I can rebuild them and run them back through the auction, and then private sales. And I'm trying to get to the restoration of classic cars, what I used to do before. To conduct that, I need the dealer license to be able to buy through every auction there is. With the general repair, I can't. So that's why I'm applying to see if we can, conclude it.
Okay. Do you have any other input? Okay. In that case, we'll now listen to our town planner, Director of Planning, and Mr. Rousseau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is a request for a special exception to Table 4.1.1A
You can have a seat. Okay.
All right.
to allow for a car dealership license to sell used automobiles limited to 4 new and used on property located at 1505 John Fitch Boulevard, the industrial zone. The applicant has provided a narrative as well as a copy of the existing site plan. This application is subject to the review criteria of Section 8.4B, which include that the proposal is consistent with the goals and objectives of the Plan of Conservation and Development. The application has met the requirements of the zoning regulations. The land is physically suited to the proposed use. Minimal, if any, adverse environmental impacts are created. No traffic or other hazards will be created. The impacts on the capacity of the present and proposed utilities, street drainage systems, sidewalks, and other elements of the infrastructure will be minimal. There will be minimal or no adverse effects on existing uses in the area. Surrounding property values will be conserved. The character of the neighborhood will be maintained or minimally disrupted. The general welfare of the community will be served. There is a balance between neighborhood acceptance and community needs. Historic factors are adequately protected, or due consideration to preservation of historic factors has been demonstrated. The overall physical appearance of the proposed development is compatible with the surrounding development and the Commission's goals for the neighborhood corridor. And the architectural design is aesthetically pleasing and blends well into the surrounding area. So as stated in the applicant's narrative, the business currently holds a general repairer license and is looking to transfer to a used car dealer license through the DMV. Our regulations only allow for a maximum of 4 cars offered for sale on the entire site. Currently, there is already a used dealer on the same site. The Planning and Zoning Commission granted for approval in 2021. At that time, that applicant presented that the license was to be able to purchase at the auction and that no cars would be stored on site for sale. The narrative submitted by the current applicant is in a similar situation. His intent is to purchase cars to repair and then resell at the auction. My question would be, how will these cars be transported to and from the auction? And finally, aerials and street side imagery, of which were included with your packets, show that this site has the potential to be overparked. There appears to be a surplus of vehicles, some of which even being parked on Kimberly Drive, associated with the respective businesses, whether they are employee-owned, scheduled for repairs, or tow trucks. And as a reminder, all vehicles associated with the business shall be parked in an approved location on site. There are no engineering comments, and if this application is approved, planning staff recommends an approval condition clarifying that the 2 businesses would only be permitted to have a total of 4 cars to be offered for sale on the site.
Thank you. Do we have comments from members of the public? Hearing and seeing none, we'll now go to commissioners. By the way, I'm going to seat Commissioner Kopchunas for Commissioner Cavanero. I think that's it.
I have no comment really at this time, I guess. I mean, there's already cars parked there. If you had a few for sale, is what it is, I guess.
No comments or questions.
Michelle, is there a time frame or time limit on this approval?
When you're granted special exceptions, they run with the property, so as long as the use is used as it was approved by the commission, it would continue, in perpetuity. There is licensing time frame, so someone would have to continue to keep their license active there, but if someone were to come in 10 years from now and they wanted to use it in a similar fashion, it would still be valid. Special exceptions don't go away.
So I guess the only question for the applicant is, if this works out well for you and you want to expand it, what would be your thought on that? How would you make that happen? Or are you content in perpetuity to limit the inventory at 4 cars? Please step up to the podium.
Well, the 4 cars is to be sold as far as being in the premises of the parking lot, correct? Like in the parking lot, which that's not my plan at all. I will not even have one. My plan is to buy 2 or 3 cars at the auction, which I had done before because I used to have a dealer when I was at another location years ago. So you buy 3 cars, 4 cars, you fix them, and you run them back to different auctions. You sell them, you buy more, you fix them. And that's how I'm able to maintain the business. And at the same time, if you have an insurance job and you want me to fix a car, that's what I'm licensed to do. That's what I do. But limited. I'm trying to bring everything down and take it a lot easier than I've been running. I'm running hard, trying to keep up with the demand. I think it's a smarter way to slow down and produce what I need to produce, doing what I like to do, and that's fixing them.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yep.
That's all I have.
I'm just kind of confused a little bit. Are you saying there are 2 businesses in the building on the aerial?
There are 2 businesses there. One is, I believe, RTT Towing.
Okay.
And then there's Eagle Auto. And RTT holds a dealer license right now.
And so they have a license to have 4 cars? on s-
RTT does, yep.
Okay. And Eagle would be sharing that license with?
Eagle would have, they would be applying for their own
So it'd be-
license.
So theoretically, 8 cars?
No, they would be limited, based on the regulations, limited to 4 for the entire site.
They share
The site is
4.
limited to 4.
Okay, that sounds reasonable. When was this aerial taken? Any ideas?
September of 2024.
2024, recently. So all these other cars that are on the site, are they used for parts, or are they just hanging out? Why are there so many cars?
Well, maybe at the time when you pass by, it is a tow yard for the next business. So sometimes if some people coming to grab cars that been there for a while, he might pull a few out to get the ones that he got to get out, then he puts it back in. I do have a mission with the guys that work. They park on the side of the street. Well, if I get approved, that's gonna change because I have the 5 parkings already for the employees, but I'm not gonna have as many when this happens, if it happens. And I'll be controlling, it's gonna look a lot cleaner, I know that for a fact.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
And I really do want to get you back to working on classic cars.
Yeah, that's what I like to do.
I can see that. Thank you.
I have no comment.
I have no further comment.
I just have one. I don't understand this from an enforcement perspective. You have a limit of 4 cars up for sale. If one of the businesses put 4 up and the other business wants to put 1 up, how is that enforced? What do we do?
They would have to coordinate between the 2. They can only have 4 at one time for the whole site.
I mean, it
So
strikes me.
you have an owner of the property, right? So it's going to be the owner's responsibility to make sure his
Okay,
tenants
so it's
don't, yeah.
one owner.
There's
2
one
businesses.
owner that has 2 tenants that would have to make sure that they remain in compliant. Through their narratives, we're being told that cars aren't going to be on site to be offered for sale to begin with. So we're kind of going based on the narratives represented here that we should not have a problem.
So the reason for, if you don't mind, Raphael, the reason for you coming to us is because you want to become a dealer, but you don't really want to deal there. You want to deal with the auction houses.
Yeah,
and what-
basically, when you're doing wholesale, it's not, I understand that I don't have the proper parking to display a dealership, and that's to have the display of putting signs and flags and all that. That's not what I'm doing here. Once again, I'm not even gonna have 1 car on the yard for sale. These cars what I'm doing is I'm buying them at the auction, and I'm bringing them back. I'm washing them, detailing them, cleaning them up, going through them, and running them right back through the auction. And nowadays, you know, cars go so much faster on social media than you parking them in your parking lot. So, you know, you buy the car, you post it, and you probably have it sold before you even fix it. So if it don't, it'll go right through the auction.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Is there any other discussion, anybody? Can we close the public hearing? Close the public hearing at 7:17 and go on to the next application. Application 2502P, McGuire Road Associates.
How you doing? My name is Blake Brandon from McGuire Road Associates. I'll be short and sweet. I don't have a whole lot more information than what was already in the narrative. I purchased the property on 37 McGuire Road back in July. It's a residential piece of property, but I purchased it knowing it was non-conforming commercial. It's been that way for 60 plus years. At the time, I was also aware that there was a residence inside one of the buildings. Assuming it was a residential zone, that would be okay. Come to find out, that's not the case. So I'm here today to get approval for that residence already pre-existing. There's already tenants already in there. For 2 years to get the site more conforming, and then come back before you to actually get it rezoned as a commercial piece of property. That's all I got.
So I can provide a brief report. It's a request for a 2-year temporary conditional permit for a residential unit in a commercial building on property located at 37 McGuire Road in a rural residential zone. As explained by Mr. Bannon there, the situation on site, he's provided a map and a narrative. It was purchased recently. It is in the residential zone, however, has industrial buildings on it and has had industrial uses on it for many, many years. There's been ZBA variances as well, granting future expansion of these industrial uses in the residential zone. So for all practical purposes, it has commercial uses that now and into the future that can be approved on it. It does appear within one of the buildings, a residential apartment was created probably 10 or 20 years ago. We're really not quite sure. Looking through town records, there's no permits or no assessment, so there's really no record of it that we could find. So in efforts to work with Blake on getting it legalized, suggested a 2-year permit so that he could work over that time to look to what he's going to do as far as potentially rezoning the property. If it were rezoned general commercial, you can have an apartment in it. So that would be one solution to legalize it. But I think at this point, the fire marshal, the building official, and the health department would all like him to come in and take out the proper permits as a residential unit, get it all legalized. I know that would help him in getting garbage cans so that the garbage will be picked up there. So this is the first step in that process. The temporary and conditional permit states that the commission may grant permits for periods not to exceed 2 years. Such approval may be given after a public hearing. If in the judgment of the commission, the public convenience and welfare will be substantially served and the appropriate use of neighboring property will not be substantially or permanently injured, and traffic and other hazards will not result from such use. So if this application is approved, staff requests the applicant work with the health department, building, and fire to get the appropriate permits in place for the residential use.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the public who would like to comment on this application or ask questions or whatever? Seeing and hearing none, we'll move on to members of the commission. Commissioner Vitari.
No comment.
My only comment is, you know, as long as everything is inspected by the building department and everything's up to code, especially for health and safety, I have no issue.
No
Commissioner Dexter.
comments here, yeah.
No comments or questions?
Commissioner Millett.
No comments or questions.
Commissioner Kupchunas?
No comments.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to get this thing, it's like a two-step process to get this thing into compliance, both with the building and all the other regulations, and then also eventually get the zoning lined up. So I'd be happy to have this happen also. Any reason to continue the public hearing? Then we're going to close the public hearing at 7:21. We'll move on to our regular meeting, calling the regular meeting to order. We have two sets of minutes. November 26, 24, regular meeting, and December 10. And I had one minor. On the November 26 minutes on page 2, there's a paragraph that starts out, Jamison noted, about halfway down the page. And the last sentence looks like it's missing a word. Is proposed to be converted to a manhole with a 4-foot, diameter. All right, never mind. Any other comments on the minutes?
Motion to approve minutes dated November 26, 2024.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And any comments on the other minutes? December 10.
Motion to approve minutes dated 12/10/2024.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Both passed unanimously. So now we have public participation. If anyone would like to come to comment or bring up issues that are not on the agenda. Seeing and hearing none. Our first item on new business is, I'll call it a report from the Design Commercial Subcommittee. The Design Commercial zone is basically property we sometimes call 22-wheeler, although there are actually, I think, 3 or 4 properties there. And we have had proposals from the applicant to change the zoning regulation. We denied their proposal without prejudice and established this committee, which has been meeting. And now we're going to have our developer come back in and see what they have to say.
Okay. All right. Well, as always, Happy New Year, and as always, thank you for allowing me the time to speak and to address you.
Identify yourself and sign in.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is John Swaggerty. I represent Down East Associates. We are the owner of the parcel of land in question that you can see on the screen right now in red. That is the 22-wheeler road, the 57-acre parcel of land behind the plaza at Buckland Hills. And like you said, Chair, I'm going to report on the subcommittee that was established last summer to study the DC zone that applies to this parcel. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time just sort of talking about the subcommittee, the context, why it was created, its goals, what the subcommittee has been up to, and reviewing some of the plans that have been considered there, and then discussing a plan that is based on feedback that came from that subcommittee. It's the first time anyone has seen it this evening. So this looks a little small. I apologize for that. But when the subcommittee was formed with the goal of finding a use for the property that sort of met the goals and objectives of a lot of different people. That was primarily to find a use that was market viable, that would minimize impacts on the residents, the neighbors that surrounded the property, and would still bring a positive net impact to this town of South Windsor, increasing tax revenues without bringing significant burden, meaning school children. And just to refresh, some of those subcommittee members were members here of the Planning and Zoning Commission, representatives from the town, some neighbors, and then the owner of the parcel and my planning consultant, Don Poland, who's here. And then in terms of the process, the subcommittee met several times between, I think half a dozen times between September and December. We started off doing a pretty comprehensive SWOT analysis, you know, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, you know, to think about the sort of the advantages and the disadvantages of the property, what it offers, visibility and impacts and proximity, access. And then in light of that analysis, the subcommittee evaluated dozens of different potential uses, commercial, industrial, residential, recreational types of uses, and sort of thought how they would fit in here. Some initial conversations focused around some uses like sports facilities or solar farms, but we found that they didn't generate much land value. Commercial uses were not favored by the neighbors, nor did we find them to be market viable in today's environment. But there was still a desire to keep that commercial use alive, keep options open for the future. And the neighbors were comfortable with a senior or an age-restricted residential community, and the developer, agreed that carried a stronger land value for the parcel than some of the other proposed uses. So that's where we sort of started off in terms of just big picture, and then from there we went into a review of different plans. There was one plan that was proposed by the town, 150 units in some townhomes and a building, a multifamily building. We found that this size of this didn't have the scale to make it into an attractive development for developers. And the density of it, the building, the neighbors didn't like that there was a building right there on their corner. So we went from there into, then the owner took the pen, as they say, and prepared a couple of plans that we discussed with the subcommittee, one of which that you see right here. This is what we reviewed in December. And this plan, again, it was our first pass. This plan populated the parcel with a mix of, again, age-restricted homes, but a mix of carriage homes and townhomes. Carriage homes being a little bit bigger with more living space on the ground floor. There were meant to be some parcels for single-family homes on Smith Street as a transition, and then with connections to surrounding roads and pedestrian access to outside of the community and into the Evergreen Walk. But we got some feedback, and then we had another plan that was here that was also discussed in December. This one with a significant future development zone for commercial in the future. And then again, populating the balance of the site with townhomes and carriage homes and the associated amenities that go with that, outdoor and indoor recreation, et cetera. So from these two plans, we got a lot of feedback from the subcommittee about the plan and some suggested additions and subtractions from that plan. And so what I'm going to show now in the next slides will be how we where the evolution of the plans went from there. So this is what we're going to call option 3A. This responds to the subcommittee's feedback with several actions. We removed the parcels that were meant for single-family homes along Smith Street. We added parking in various places to accommodate for visitors to the center or to the community. We added the recreational amenities of the community between the shopping center and the homes to serve as a buffer. We pulled back the homes from this sort of most eastern edge of the property and away from the boundary lines, away from the homes. 2 access points, but still retaining the future development commercial zone. And then one thing we did also was to use all carriage homes as a sample housing product type instead of the townhomes, because we didn't want to sort of over-densify the property. This still gave a unit count of 219 units and a density of 4.3 units per acre, and of course with that 5.5 acre future development zone next to it. We have an option 3B To accompany that, incorporating those same changes that I just discussed, only carriage homes, pulling the homes away from the property line. The only thing this one does is it removes that future commercial zone, and then fills in its place with more homes to arrive at about 242 units, that same density per acre. Just for the purpose of understanding the tax benefits that could go along with a few more units, especially given what we believe is a current commercial environment that we don't believe will sort of result in a commercial development in this area for quite some time. So this one, we'll call it 220 units, the next one 240, and then we did a little bit of a fiscal impact analysis to identify the tax generation that would come from these communities, estimating at about $12,000 per year per unit in real estate taxes, which is the bulk of the taxes, of course. Here, we have no school children to account for, so your sort of impacts your cost to the city. We're just town. We're estimated at 15% of your total revenue, which results in a $2.5 million net annual impact to the town for your smaller plan, and $2.7 million for your larger plan, or about a $250,000 increment for the slightly larger plan without the commercial holdback. From there, we were going to go into a discussion point, sort of an open discussion point in the subcommittee was to think through the zoning pathway, what might be the right options to apply to the property, which we have a discussion here. I just thought that would be, before we did that, it might be a time to stop and perhaps answer questions or just take a beat, as they say.
So you're pausing so we can ask questions about what we've already seen. Any commissioners? Would you just explain for everybody what a carriage house is versus a townhouse?
Yeah. You can see just on the plan alone that the townhouses are in the whitish color and the carriage houses are in yellow. So one obvious thing is that the townhouses are a little smaller, but the townhomes are meant to be sort of a more condensed living style where you pull into a garage at the ground floor, you go upstairs where you would have your kitchen and your living spaces on the second floor, and then bedrooms on the third. Carriage houses are a little larger, so they're meant to have a more limited garage so that there can be more living spaces on the ground floor. Maybe it'll be your kitchen and your living, your TV room and your hangout room. Maybe they'll squeeze a bedroom down there. Sort of depends on different styles of them. But it would usually have more space, primarily bedrooms, on a second floor.
Thank you. I know you explained that to our committee, but everyone to hear. Any other, okay, want to proceed then?
So, yeah.
Oh, you didn't? I'm sorry.
I think just so that the whole commission understands what else is behind here is the affordable component, that we all had talked about that, and keeping it at 15 was important to the subcommittee, so I just want you all to know that as well.
So the advantage of 15 is it makes some incremental improvement in our goal of reaching 10%. Since if we only did 10%, it would just be break even.
So like I said, those were the plans, and then the next piece would be to talk about the zoning, and Don can address that.
Good evening, Chair, members of the Commission. For the record, my name is Don Poland. I'm with the firm of Gilman York, located in East Hartford, Connecticut.
Did you sign in, Don?
Sorry?
Did you sign in?
Oh, sorry. So at the committee, we had, I think, kicked around a few ideas related to zoning and how to proceed with zoning, and had gone back and forth. After the last meeting of the committee, I had a further brief discussion with Michelle about your existing zoning regs and potential pathways forward. So, and we heard you, Chair, throughout the process talking about there needs to be, you know, at least a framework at this point as to how to proceed with zoning. So based on what we heard, based on my discussions with Michelle, ultimately I've crafted here over the course of 2 or 3 slides a framework essentially for moving forward. It would be based on your existing MF zone. I believe there's 2 MFs. There's an MF something and an MF. Yeah, A and AA. The concept at this point would be to create a third, which would be MFAG for age restricted, and then that would facilitate the ability to make some additional tweaks to kind of units, the bulk and area requirements and maybe some of the site design stuff, but utilizing that similar process. It would be created as an overlay zone, so it would start the process with a master plan for the zone change, and then ultimately site plan and special permit. Before any application came forward in that regard for the master plan, the site plan, special permit, and I would hope would be the final result of kind of the committee's work, would be actually the crafting and the adopting of a text amendment to make this possible in the regulations. So using the existing section 3.4, the multifamily, I then just essentially here conceptualize the various subsections. They're each of the, so it says permitted uses and then followed by age-restricted housing only. Each one of those permitted uses, densities, setbacks are subcategories within 3.4. And essentially what I'm saying here is, you know, just providing this framework that we could go through and provide, you know, the specific sub-provisions for what this age-restricted use and its development would look like. In things like restricting it to, say, carriage houses and or, you know, townhouses only, I think leaning in the carriage house at this point. That would prevent a future application from coming in with garden-style apartments, let's say. Restricting the number of bedrooms is still a viable option. You know, you have existing access standards related to the size of streets. We would abide by those, and I would say mimic those, whether it's multifamily or, you know, market rate or age restricted, the infrastructure requirements should remain the same. 2 parking spaces per unit, using a carriage house approach, not a garden style, would afford the opportunity to do 1 space in a garage for each unit and 1 space in a driveway for each unit, and then whatever visitor communal parking is needed. Requiring a minimum of 2 access points into the site. As we know, the fire marshal would want that, and the committee expressed the desire to have that it wouldn't be accessed by 1 point. Could go further and restrict no access to Smith Street, since the Smith Street residents, through their participants on the committee, expressed concerns over that. Abiding by your EV regulations and meeting those standards and requirements. The one thing I will say, and I know Commissioner Dexter, you raised the 15%. I'm just going to throw this out here and kind of struggle with it. When I was doing this, and as you'll see, my verbiage there says 10%. Just let me speak to this briefly. One, I was thinking of your current provisions that I think actually require 18%, and that was my largest concern. When dealing with an ownership product, that this would be the meeting the affordability requirements becomes more challenging. So for example, just right now, if you just take a rental unit and you say maximum income 80% AMI and then 30% of that income is the max that can be spent. And what happens is the rent on those units gets deducted. So let's say, and I'm just speaking in round numbers here, let's say it's a one-bedroom for $2,000 a month market rate. That rent may be reduced to, say, $1,600 a month to meet that 80% AMI. So that's $400 per month times 12, approximately $5,000 per year in income that's lost off of that unit. On the rental side, what typically is going on is the market rents are strong enough on the remaining 82% or 85% of the units that aren't affordable restricted, and ultimately the math can work to carry it. When you're dealing with a common interest community in sales, the numbers work a little bit different. So I think we had discussed in committee, and the numbers I used on the fiscal impact was assuming a sales value on these of approximately $500,000. So a unit selling for $500,000 probably cost $420,000 to build, right? Well, if you take 80% AMI as the affordability rate, which would essentially be around $85,000, multiply that times 4. 8 times 4 is 32, and then 5,000, what that gets us to, I don't know, me and my math are awful. 340,000. So now you have a unit that costs $420,000 to build, and the maximum sale value is $340,000. Multiply that over 18%, which was my concern, 15% as you raised, and you're starting to talk about really big dollars, millions of dollars across. Let's just say 200 units at 15%, that's 30 units, $80,000 per unit lost, and so forth. It gets tough. I went to 10. I think it's a number somewhere between 10 and 15. I think maybe a 12% could work or so. I know you guys want more affordable units, and I commend you for that, and they are needed. It's just really tough to do on the homeownership side. And just so you know, that's not me standing here saying that for John's sake, my client's sake. We just finished a affordable housing finance study for WestCog, the Council of Governments down in Fairfield County. We finished it early last year. It's available online. And it goes through all the dynamics of the challenges of financing affordable housing, whether ownership or rental. And the exact kind of concerns that I just raised are expressed in that report. It's much harder to do on the ownership side than it is on the rental side. So I'll just put that out there for consideration, and we're willing to discuss that further moving forward. So with that in mind, going that route, if it was acceptable, I think it would be great if the DC committee could meet again once or twice. We could draft a more formal, text amendment to create the MFAG, get it before staff and the committee, do another meeting with the committee to kind of hash it out, and maybe get it into a form that then could be brought before the PZC. And then once that was established, it would give the opportunity for a master plan approach with a zone change and a site plan special permit. One could precede the other, or they could be run simultaneously, however the applicant chose to do it. So with that, I will end, and I'm here with John to answer any further questions and to hear any concerns that you may have. Thank you for your time.
Okay. So the committee was charged with bringing concepts back to the PZC, and then, before we go to the effort of writing a big, long section of our zoning. This is our opportunity to see how we're reacting to these proposals. And I'll just start with Commissioner Kupchunas. Do you have any thoughts here?
More senior housing in town. So, I mean, I don't know, you know, how many seniors really want to, I guess you guys do all the market studies, everything on it, but, you know, at what point are we just going to become a town of the elderly? I mean, we have to bring young people into town. I know we're overfilling our schools and all this, but I think we have to get creative in a way to somehow not just be a community of senior citizens.
So it's
I don't
interesting.
wanna-
I'll interrupt you because that was a misconception I think all of us had. What kind of people will come into a 55 and up?
One, I do agree with you. There is a concern over being a community of seniors. That being said, across our society, as a whole, we are aging. And we saw the move to a senior product back in the early 2000s. I don't know if you guys experienced it. I was town planner in East Windsor, and we experienced it. I think we approved 3 age-restricted developments back in the early 2000s. During that time period, the market got overbuilt, and it went silent. You didn't see any senior product. I actually ended up in probably around 2010, 2012, or probably 2008 to 2012, I helped a number of developers across multiple communities get the senior restrictions removed from developments that had been approved because it was overbuilt, and they couldn't get them financed, and they couldn't get them occupied if they were built. That being said, that was an early wave, and it was before the wave. But the wave is now here with the senior product, and it's going to last at least 20 plus years due to the baby boomers when you look at where their age cohorts are. So on the market side, there is demand for it. That being said, at the end of the day, the 55 and over age restricted, you're going to get 55 and older, you know, kind of empty nester households that gravitate towards that. So it's on the lower side of the curve more so than the higher side of the curve. When you start talking about the assisted living and stuff, then you see the age numbers kick up. This is, every time I say this number, I cringe as much as the first time I read it. The average age of a person in an assisted living facility is 81 years old. It's super high. They're not getting the 70s and 75-year-olds into those facilities unless there's, you know, chronic issues. This product really leans towards what we call kind of aging dinks, dual income, no kids, that's going into it. So I wouldn't think of it as just simply seniors. It is a bit of a younger cohort than that. That being said, though, having a diversity of housing stock, whether it be single-family detached or multifamily, whether it be age-restricted or not age-restricted, whether it be affordable, there's a place in the market for most, if not all of it.
Thank you. I'll let you continue.
That's really my only comment on it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Willett?
Only comment is about the affordability. So we've made kind of a stand here. 15% is where we're drawing the line. And if we make an exception here, we have to make an exception everywhere else. That's my only comment.
How do you feel about, you know, this idea of this being pretty much all residential or a small amount of commercial? How do you feel about those possible plans there?
The last 2 versions of 3 are both, you know, I think the ones that we centered on in our subcommittee meeting, and they work.
Commissioner Bernstein?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this document reflects good work. I generally like what I see here. I like some of the options. The document seems to assure that we will have 0 school kids, and I don't know how you can do that. I'm fairly certain that it won't be an overwhelming number, but I think you can't say 0. So that's one comment. Second comment, and I would be curious to hear from the commissioners that served on this subcommittee. I'm looking at a line that says, commercial uses were not favored by neighbors nor are market viable in today's environment. And I'm just thinking, if I weren't on this committee, if I were just a resident of South Windsor and I served on this subcommittee, probably the thing I would favor most is commercial. My wife and I love going to stores and restaurants and such in South Windsor. We like to keep our money here. We live here. We pay taxes here. So can you give me any feedback on why commercial was not hotter?
Don, I'll let you maybe answer.
Yeah, I mean, one, going back from the beginning with my client and our perspectives on the market is just, it's an oversaturated market to begin with, in the retail.
Based on what? How do you measure that?
Based on vacancies.
Okay, we're still coming out of COVID.
Still coming out of COVID, but you still have a changing dynamic in retail. It's improved greatly since COVID. I don't think anyone in the industry would deny that. But the fact is, the Buckland Hills Mall is not going to return to what it once was. It's going to have to find alternatives. Your additions and work with Evergreen have been phenomenal, attracting Costco into there, attracting Whole Foods into there, their ability to relocate tenants and so forth. But you still have substantial vacancies in there that are going to persist and are going to be challenging. As a regional marketplace, kind of, everyone that's in the Buckland Hills area, whether it's Manchester or South Windsor, everyone that wants to be here is already here. So dipping into that pool to find more occupants is challenging. But, while we have taken the market perspective throughout this process, the neighbors were very clear about their lack of desire to have commercial there. That they, ultimately, I believe it was once said, if it was up to them, they'd like it to remain vacant moving forward, that was their preferred option. They recognize that's not an option.
I'm sorry.
But would like the residential option.
The neighbors preferred open space? Is that what you're saying?
That was said in one of the early meetings, that if they had their option, it would remain the way it is today. But if they had to choose, then they were favorable towards residential, not to commercial. And I think they view the residential as providing a buffer from the commercial that's already there to the south and so forth. So there was a strong preference, and it's not coming from me. I hope the other committee members can substantiate that the residents of Smith Street were very much opposed to commercial options.
I hear. I'm just surprised, and like I said, had I been on this committee, I probably would have favored commercial. But thank you. I appreciate that. My only other comment is to express a frustration. I sit in these meetings and I hear smart people like Don and others in past meetings basically come up and say that the affordability issue is a challenge because of the cost of construction. And, we look at essentially actuarial tables to substantiate this. And I don't think it's this commission's role to solve that problem, if that indeed is the core problem with affordability. It's not our job to solve that. I guess it's something that the state needs to look into, but to me, there should be other entities that can assist commissions like this get underneath that. We made the decision we want to hold at 15%, not because we want you guys to lose money, but because we have a mandate. And I'm beginning to find it unfair that we get painted in a corner on this issue. So just expressing a frustration. If you have a comment, I would love to hear it, but it's not necessary.
Yeah, I share your frustration, and it's something that I've been critical of 8-30G, the Affordable Housing Land Use Statute. The statute's well-intended, but it basically shifts the burden of affordability to the private market. It says, we will give you zoning leniency, waivers, density bonuses, and so forth as incentives, but you, the private developer, have to absorb the affordability loss. And like I said, on apartments, it works a little better. On sales, it's more challenging. But yeah, so the state has said as a public policy, we need more affordable housing. But at the same time, they've said you, the private sector, have to cover it. And I think it's somewhere in between that. You have a great goal of adding affordable housing. You're under a mandate to do so, right? I am sympathetic to that. I get that. The developers in general, I think, would like to be able to add affordability components if they work financially within the context of the developments. What's missing there is the state public piece to actually provide direct funding or subsidy to help bridge that gap. And that's what's not there now. That's not to say there aren't state programs for affordable housing like the low-income tax credit programs and so forth, but they're not designed for that 80% AMI that a commission like you is trying to achieve and that a developer is trying to propose. So there's a missing gap there in the policy. So I share your frustration.
Commissioner Dexter.
So I was on the commission, and it's been very frustrating. Every single commercial possibility we've brought forward, it's been, no, we can't do that. No, there's no market. No, there's no this, there's no that. But then you read, this town got this town got that. Over here, they're going to build this. I'm not criticizing. It's just been frustrating because my first choice is not to change the zone at all. But we are working, trying to work together, and I do appreciate what you've sent here as the unit number comes down, the density comes down a little bit. We've just recently told 2 senior development applicants we are not moving from 15. So I can't stress that enough. I mean, we weren't very popular those 2 nights. But I am curious about one thing. Why does it have to be all rentals or alls for sale?
If you go back to our initial concept that we brought to you back a year ago, I think that conceptualized 2 products, that the carriage house style to the interior was possibly an age restricted, was possibly market, but it was most likely a for sale product, an ownership product. And then the garden style was a rental product. That can work at that scale. I would envision that as probably 2 separate developments. One developer would probably do the apartments, the other developer would probably do the carriage house. As the unit numbers come down, rather than 300 units, 300 plus units in each of those developments, you'd now be talking, if say we're talking 219 units, you'd be talking 100 plus units in each size. The economies of scale are lost on the developer side when the unit numbers come down. You're once again probably looking at 2 different developers. One's comfortable with doing the ownership product, the other one's more comfortable with that. And then the one other thing I'll say is just in the age-restricted realm, there's not a lot of market out there for a rental product. Even though there's people out there that would like to have it, the price points at which they would like to have it tend to come in under what it would cost to provide. So the market hasn't found a vehicle for providing it. So it's not out of the realm of possibility, but it's challenging. So.
And then my last comment, Stephen, I'll be done, is just envisioning that parcel from Pleasant Valley or from Wheeler or from sitting in Joanne Fabric's parking lot, and how 2 access points are going to work with any number of homes. People are on the move, and it's all in their own cars. You know, so I struggle a little bit with that, but I digress.
I think on the age restricted, if I may, just, you're gonna find when it gets to the point of traffic studies that you don't have the same elevated peaks because people aren't rushing, not as many people are rushing out the door for work. So you're gonna have flatter levels across the entire day. Not to say that there won't be a lot of trip generation, you just won't have the spiky peaks.
Especially if that little commercial corner
Yep,
is where they get their coffee in the morning, whatever that they do. I still like there's a little commercial.
yep, understood, thank you.
All right.
Mr. Foley.
Couple comments. So I'm with Commissioner Burstein. I do believe that there is a place for the commercial. It's gonna take you guys a little bit of extra work. But we see ribbon cuttings going on in surrounding communities nonstop. And again, you have to work a little harder. And as it comes down to, Don, what did you say it costs per unit to build? 420?
For what?
To build per unit, you said.
On
The
an
cost-
apartment product right now, I mean, the ballpark that I start with when working numbers is about 265,000 per unit. On the carriage houses, you're probably talking, a starting number. If we're talking a $500,000 resale product, I think it could be higher based on some recent numbers I saw, but you're talking 420,000 to build the unit, probably.
So that's a 2,000 square foot unit.
Yeah, probably in the,
Because right now,
probably in
you
the
guys are building
1,800
it, you're a
base.
developer, it's $220 a
Yeah.
square foot.
Yeah.
No matter what, any builder's making money at $220 a square foot, or they wouldn't be building houses at that rate. So, again, I have no tears for developers. 15% we're hardline on that. So there's no negotiating. We've already been through this with other two applicants, so that we're not moving for you. And then the other question is, did you guys just recently sell the plaza at Buckland Hills?
I'll let John speak to that.
My corporate entity sold the majority interest in the property in the property adjacent, the Plaza Buckland Hills. I was under a confidentiality, so I couldn't mention any of that in any kind of public fashion whatsoever. But, to us, it always feels like, well, first I have to note that the buyer of that property we have a good relationship with, so we have to consider it that we still can dialogue with that owner. But we've always considered them to be separate parcels, separate towns, separate goals, separate sort of like future going forward uses. And so we don't see that having a different ownership entity represents any impact to the process that we're in right now.
Was it offered to combine the two parcels with this?
The buyer is a shopping center operator, so they're not a developer.
Right.
They were not interested in the vacant parcel.
Well, I'll reiterate my comment that I do believe that commercial, again, to me, it's laziness of the developer, that it's easy to just build the houses, and it's easy for you, but our impact to this community, again, we're gonna be a geriatric capital of Connecticut soon if we continue in this pace. Our senior housing, our senior center, our senior buses, we're not gonna be able to keep up with, our facilities are now gonna get overwhelmed for your convenience. That's why I'm leaning more towards having a commercial component to this project. So that's my comment.
Well, you're referring to option 3A or something else?
At the minimum, I'm still looking at option 2A as well. Yes, 2B is something I would.
So Kevin, may I make a comment on this?
Go ahead.
So one of the things that was presented in the subcommittee is when we got to option 3A, option 4 was we're gonna apply for low-income housing. That was the threat. Yeah, and then they had quantified out what the impact is to the town of having to, accommodate all those kids, build a new school. That would absolutely move us to, because it was not 300 units, it was much higher. Now we're talking full-time fire and everything else. So that's the issue at hand, is they're holding the threat of 830G in the property, which at that point, we're in a tough spot. Unless we get to apply for another moratorium, then we're okay.
We should be trying to do, but I'm looking at it saying, yeah, I understand that they're gonna strong arm us, or that's gonna be, everybody that comes in front of us is gonna try that, you know, and that's what we have attorneys for. So,
To add to your point about commercial development, it's a little bit of a weak argument to come to us and say, there is no commercial that would want to move into South Windsor. I go down Sullivan farther where it meets with Rye. We have 3 buildings. The first 2 are completely full. The third one is, from what I understand, half rented out before they started laying bricks. There is a market for commercial in South Windsor. To Kevin's point, it just feels like this is the easiest path and probably the most lucrative path for you if you can get out of doing something commercial.
But remember, you know, it's a 57-acre parcel, right? So if we were gonna really do a commercial development, it would have to be something large, like what we looked at in the prior plans that were proposed, you know, way back in the, you know, 80s to 90s. And in this day and age, you know, there just aren't enough anchor boxes that are alive and viable today to populate a project like this. Everybody is either not in business, there's a lot fewer of them than there used to be, or everybody's already here in this market. So, you know, combine both a sort of penetration, sort of a lack of tenants with what's also, you know, the bulk of this property doesn't have good, you know, visibility from your surrounding roads. You know, it really just doesn't, you don't have the tenants for it, construction costs are very high, you really just don't have the fundamentals in place between tenant demand, construction costs, visibility and access to make that into a viable site. And then we heard from the neighbors that, you know, through the subcommittee that really didn't want to see, you know, a large-scale commercial project like that would have been, you know, very close to their homes.
yeah, I mean, I'm not looking for like a large scale, but almost to what Commissioner Lett had said, that at the end of Sullivan Avenue at Rye, we have those buildings with fantastic, now we got establishments where you can get food, I mean, and other services. Again, something to accommodate this age-restricted area. I think if you did do that component and got creative and reached out to Tartsinis or one of these developers that do these commercial plazas, that you could get physical therapy offices in there, you could get that, you know, you could get a restaurant. I don't know, I'm just saying get creative. I know that it's easy for you, okay? That's the purpose for saying we can't do it, or that the residents of Smith Street, so that's basically not in my backyard, but as far as the community as a whole, call this its own community. It would be nice to have a place to get a coffee, breakfast, lunch, dinner, something like that. That's what I'm just saying, to get creative. That's just my thought.
Commissioner Terry.
I pretty much agree with what Commissioner Foley is saying as far as the commercial part. I don't want, with Joann Fabrics, Trader Joe's, the whole other thing that's there, I don't want another shopping center. I think that makes no sense. But to have something, especially if it's going to be a senior housing, age-restricted housing, to have a restaurant, to have a place for exercise or something like that for the community to use, I think would be a nice piece. And in looking at 2B, that open piece of property there would lend itself to something like that. I think that would be a nice part of it. In fact, I would be a very strong fan of making something like that a part of it. The other thing that I'm a very strong fan of is the 15%. I think that it's just, we've held everybody else to that standard, and it's one of those things. I don't know that there isn't a way for a project this size to have vendors that are willing to work with you to make it less of a burden on you and still become a quality product and one that would be you know, up to the standard that we're looking for. I'm happy that we're looking low 200s and as far as total units. I remember at the very beginning of this project, I was hearing 600s and I would go home at night and cry thinking about that many units being thrown back there. So I think this is a lot more reasonable, a lot nicer number and something that could be worked with. I agree that a single road of access or two roads of access, with senior housing, it's not as overwhelming as it would be. I think we've all had concerns about schooling, and yeah, maybe there's going to be some students from here, but certainly not as much as the impact could be elsewise, so I'm in favor of it being the age-restricted. Otherwise, I mean, I like the direction that you folks have been coming in. I think that you're listening to a lot of what we're talking about. Hopefully you'll listen to some of the fine-tuning comments we've got tonight, but this is going in the right direction as far as I'm concerned.
So I do have a question about the sale of this other shopping center. Right now, it's a single parcel, is that not correct?
The plaza is a separate parcel from what's in South Windsor. And then what's called 22 Wheeler is actually across four parcels.
Yes.
There's 4 parcels back there, so there's multiple parcels.
Does the property line follow the town line? Because I'm not familiar with a property line back there.
Because, I mean, one thing I've always thought was ideal was to take advantage of that roadway that goes next to Joanne Fabrics and goes right into that property, and all of a sudden, it's a road to nowhere, and yet it would be a great access for that community to go out onto.
So the best I can say to that is ultimately if this were to move forward, let's say 220 units move forward, right? And we came up with the zone, developer came in and moved forward with it, it's gonna require an OSTA review and permit. State DOT is gonna, in the end, be the one that's gonna say where access is and so forth. My gut at this point tells me they're not gonna want it through that existing intersection due to the limited egresses out of that plaza. And we all know the craziness of getting in and out of that plaza. But at the end of the day, I think that will be determined by OSTA, so.
I still think that in our regulations, we could look for internal access if that's something the commission wanted to try to look for. I understand OSTA will be the decider, but I think at the subcommittee meeting, a couple things we talked about that I don't see reflected on this plan was, I'm not sure what happened to the berms, if they get eliminated along Wheeler Road with this plan. It looks like kind of they are. We're trying to preserve the berms, even if we're going into something other than commercial, because once you take those berms down, you're opening up your multifamily to the commercial elements without them there. So they seem to be missing in this. And also, we did talk about a connection into the mall, because again, every single person's gonna have to come out onto Pleasant Valley Road to then turn around and go into the next driveway to go into the mall. So those were two things that at the subcommittee level we did look for.
The spirit of the berms are there. I mean, we're at the conceptual right now. I don't think our intent is
Everything just got closer to Wheeler Road, so again,
We do have to recognize that these pictures are probably not exactly what we're gonna see with a site plan that comes in with an actual application. So really trying to write the zoning regulation that gives us this conceptually, the number of units, the size of the units, all that stuff, which I think was kind of addressed on your slide 12, would be, but you know, preservation of berms would be something useful. But I guess the charter for this committee is to go off and write regulations if we're more or less happy with this, or do you want to change what the committee is being asked to do? In other words, if we were to say, write the zoning regulations so you could build a 3A or a 3B or a 2B, is that what we want to tell the committee to do? I'm hearing the sound of silence.
Mr. Chair, so are you asking us to provide favorable input on various options?
I would say yes, but again, you're not approving a site plan, you're just
Right.
approving the concept. So the one concept is a certain number of housing units with a little commercial area off to one side that might meet some of the comments we've heard. Again, for the committee with a lot of help from the applicant to write the zone regulation that would make that possible. Or maybe we don't want the commercial, we like all the residential. So
Don, quick question. On, between 2B and 3A, 3A you have 219 units. 2B, you have 227 units. So your volume of units is larger in the 2B, but we also have more land for, we'll say commercial, correct?
Yeah.
The density? Yeah. I just out of curiosity, is the townhouses, are they less attractive to the age of?
So, yeah, the split level living is maybe a little less attractive. I think we sensed within the committee itself kind of a favoritism towards the carriage houses.
No.
So that's what shifted us in that direction.
now there also, there was some concern about providing a place for people to get exercise, but there would be amenities required in this. Our multifamily requires what sort of amenities, and what would we be doing with, you know?
Yeah, so
Hiking trails, pools, houses.
So on the conceptual plans here, all of them, they do have walking trails with the idea of that connection to Smith and over to Evergreen ultimately. So there's internal walking trails, external connections. There is a clubhouse. The clubhouse conceptualizes some type of exercise facilities, some other kinds of spaces, whether they're some workspaces or, you know, catering space. And there's also a pool that's shown and conceptualized within it. You know, as we said at the committee, the more amenity rich we make this, the less burdensome it will be on your town services. I do want you to know, when doing the fiscal impacts on this, my prior fiscal impacts before you guys have held the municipal services at 12% of total. I bumped them to 15 here to account for maybe some senior stuff. And I also want to remind you, if this is a common interest community, then these are private roads and no town trash pickup. So there is, you know, a thing there. And I think at the end of the day, we all realize that whoever develops this is probably going to have to work with the town on that pump station in this location. So I think there are, you know, I think the fiscals are reasonable. I think they do recognize some, you know, some services to the town. But at the same time, I think it would be an amenity-rich development that would minimize those impacts to you guys, so.
If I could comment, Andrea Confrancesco, the Adult and Senior Services, she's telling me that the biggest impact she's getting from these kinds of facilities is the request for busing. So in future developments, particularly ones that we have coming in, just like Evergreen Crossing, they have their own bus to take people, so she will not, the town doesn't pick up people in Evergreen Crossing. I think when we get to large-scale developments like this, there may be some consideration that we have that they have to provide some kind of busing for the community, because that is by far the biggest demand she's having with these new developments coming online.
I mean, also though, the revenue that it's providing could certainly pay for some busing too, right?
It doesn't quite work that way. I wish it would, but it doesn't because it collected, it goes towards that. It goes into the general fund and we have a budget, so. That'd be the case Andy would have to make.
So
I
I
like the
can,
idea
I
of
can
requiring
comment.
busing, yeah. I'm sorry, Paul.
I can comment on that. I drove a bus for the senior center, and probably a third of all my pickups were Bury Patch. And that's what we're talking about here. By the way, while I have the floor, my preference is 2B with a strong recommendation that the future development area be something other than residential.
So 2B, basically, the distinction is townhouses versus carriage houses?
It includes both in it.
Lilla Beach, yeah, Summer Beach.
You know, it's like, I visited a friend down in Florida at the Villages, and you take, this is kind of like a miniature, it could be, you know, if it was planned right, if the developer was willing to do a high-class, high-end, you can get that commercial component, and it would thrive. You just, trust me.
I agree, it's just scale. I have to chuckle a bit when you say the Villages. I mean, that's a what? That's a 60,000 person subdivision.
But if you go to the individual ones, they're all an individual, they're this size. So you pick your theme however you want it to be, but I don't think you should, you know, push away that commercial component, because any restaurant, you put a bar here, them older people, they like to drink.
Understood. I just want to make clear, we're hearing all of your input, whether it be the affordable, whether it be the commercial corner, and so forth and so on. So, and at the end of the day, this isn't just about us. This is about the committee reassembling to come up with a acceptable reg to the community and to the property owner.
So Michelle, again, with the affordable, is it possible? What are our limits on having affordable housing not be the same size, the same number of bedrooms as what we have here? You know,
I think in your inclusionary zoning section, you talk about that they have to be like type units. They don't have to be identical units, but if you're, I think bedroom counts would have to be similar, that kind of thing. We'd have to flush it out a little bit.
I mean, is that something we could address? Maybe, I mean, we've heard several different developers come in here and tell us that it's difficult.
Yeah, we could take a look at what we have written there to see if we want to make some tweaks to make that part a little bit more flexible, if that's what you're thinking. Sure.
Yeah.
So could I just ask this committee for some clarity in what you're saying to us? I just want to make sure. So theoretically, or kind of the way we presented this was, you know, this is the work, option 1, option 2A, option 2B. These are some of the options that were discussed in the context of the committee. We took advice, we shifted things around, we moved the clubhouse from this location, you know, down to the property line to get properties away and so forth and so on. But now in this, we've heard multiple times certain people like 2B, while we weren't really offering 2B, we had evolved to 3A and 3B. So let me ask you this question, because 3B has 219 units, or 3A is 219, 3B has 242, and the unit counts then are kind of in similar ballparks here. So when you guys say 2B, are what you saying is a larger commercial carve-out? Is that what we're hearing from you? Are we hearing, I just also want to be further clear, are we hearing you want to mix of townhouses and carriage houses, or is this about the commercial carve-out? Okay. Okay.
And at least visually, it seems like there's more free space, open space, call it what you will.
Okay.
I mean, my concern, these images look very nice. But the reality is, when we build these things, they end up looking like berry patch, which I'm not a fan of. And that's what I don't want here. I want room, open space, not clutter. And so I'm just reacting to what my eyes are telling me.
So really what we're talking about is the number of units, some size specification, the amount of commercial. We could almost draft the regulations and come back here and change those numbers.
Right.
I mean, between you, Steve, and Stephanie and Mike, is there enough information for you guys to?
I guess I was gonna go around one more time because I've heard a couple people talk about 2B, but I'm not sure everybody's on the same page. I personally would go for, you know, the 3B or 3A option, maybe tweaking the numbers.
So what
Again,
I'm,
don't look at where he put the clubhouse on one picture versus the other, because that's a site plan issue that would come up, but.
yeah. So what I'm hearing though is you guys are leaning towards essentially what is 3A. You want the commercial component and all that other stuff you're talking about. So this is kind of the starting point for crafting a reg, that there be a commercial component. We'll probably end up debating size and so forth and so on. You seem to like the carriage houses more than the townhouses, so we'll head in that direction. We want to make sure we have the amenities. We want to make sure we have the open space and so forth and so on. So I think we have direction to start with. Kind of a 3A as a working platform. It's not cast in stone, but we're in a density realm that works and so forth.
And we would write regulations where something like 3A could be proposed.
Yeah,
It's not that planned.
right. But that's, yeah.
Would we need to carve out places, or would that be open? You know, you could put your commercial anywhere you want, or would we want to carve out geometries in this? You know, like, that's a nice corner for commercial. It's probably the best, if you're gonna do it, it's probably the best place.
Yeah.
But if the applicant came in and wanted to put housing there and put the commercial up in the upper right corner there where you could never get to it, I mean, that's what,
Yeah.
you gotta be careful when you write regulations. that-
I mean, I think at the end of the day, if there's going to be a commercial component, it has to front Pleasant Valley, and it most likely should be on the corner at Wheeler. I don't think you have to carve it out specifically, but we can draft parameters as to kind of size and location to ensure that it gets there.
Michelle, you were,
No, I was gonna say, you could say it has to be fronting on a collector road, which Pleasant Valley is, so, you know,
Yeah.
we don't see it on Smith Street or something.
Yeah.
okay. I think you probably summarized what we're hearing. Does everyone agree? Okay. Any other comments? Thank you for all your effort, and
Yeah, I guess at this point, we'll work with staff on kind of a timeline to get a draft together, and then a next meeting for the committee, and kind of take it from there.
we have a schedule, our original schedule had a meeting next week, which may be too soon.
Yeah, I'm not having the draft for you by
So
next
we're
week.
really gonna come up,
Sorry.
come up with a new schedule. Okay. And I'll be working with Michelle to help that happen.
We thank you guys. We appreciate your time and your cooperation in working with us, and we look forward with working with you further.
Okay. Moving on, under new business, we could take up application 24-47P, Eagle Auto.
I'm going to make a motion that we approve application 24-47P. This is Eagle Auto Collision Center LLC. This is for a car dealership license to sell new and used automobiles, limited to total of 4 for the site. This approval is for a car dealership license to sell new and used automobiles. The approval limits the total number of cars to be offered for sale on site to 4. Number 2, no building permit will be issued until the final Mylars have been filed in the town clerk's office. Number 3, all plans used in the field by the developer must bear the stamp and authorized signature of the town of South Windsor. Number 4, this approval does not constitute approval of the sanitary sewer, which can only be granted by the Water Pollution Control Authority. Number 5, the building street number must be included on the final plan. All parking needs must be met on site. 6, pavement markings must be maintained in good condition throughout the site drives and parking areas. 7, all freestanding signs and/or building signs require the issuance of a sign permit before they are erected. And the last condition is that any cars posted for sale shall be parked on site in designated parking areas.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Terry. Any discussion? We're ready to vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? It passes unanimously.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for staying.
You know, glad to have you in town. Okay. And would you believe in that short time I lost my agenda? So let's see. There it is. Now we'll take up the McGuire Road, application 25-02P.
Yeah. So, good night.
There is a draft motion. Okay, Mike's going to do it.
So are we just doing the, yeah, so motion to approve application 25-02P, McGuire Associates temporary and conditional permit. Not the whole thing, just the back? All right. Conditions are there's a two-year temporary and conditional permit for a residential unit in a commercial building on property located at 37 McGuire Road, RR zone. Number 1, the temporary and conditional permit will expire on 1/14/2027. Number 2, the fire marshal, building and health departments must be consulted and proper permits obtained for the existing apartment conversion.
Second.
I have a second from Commissioner Dexter. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay. The next item was the C-Tech Solar. That's been postponed. Do we have any bonds?
You have 2 bonds.
Oh, there you go. You want to do it? Okay.
First bond, application 24-24P, A1 Glass Re-Subdivision. Engineering Department recommends a bond in the amount of $8,438 for subdivision improvements. Subdivision bond 21-37P, Kilkenny Heights, amount of $256,100, a reduction of $121,100 to leave a balance of $135,000.
Okay, do we have a second? Second. Okay. Any discussion? Approving both of these. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay. There was something you wanted to bring up earlier.
So we were, just wanted to make everybody aware that New Canaan successfully applied for and was approved for their second 830G moratorium. So they have an additional 4 years of moratorium. And I'll forward all the documents to Michelle. She can forward them to all of us in turn. I would like to figure out how we go through, if we can, figure out using the new formulas. I wasn't aware of all of the formulas they use in the state of Connecticut to determine what is considered an affordable housing unit. I did not realize that it considered all of the stuff as in Berry Patch, but also all of the senior housing, nursing homes, those are all considered part of that. And I'd like us to revisit that to see if we can reapply.
Yeah, and just for the commission, if you want to just give yourself some background on it, on our website, on the planning department website, the application that we did file that got us the first 4-year moratorium, it's there in its completeness. And these things that you're talking about, what we get credit for and what we don't get credit for, it explains right there how many points you get for what things. What I will say is, since we applied for that 4 years ago, we have not put online one additional affordable unit. So does it have to be online? It's based on COs. So in other words, we would have to do another series of more affordable units to be able to apply for a second moratorium. I'd be glad to sit down and go through it with you, though, and explain it. But you know, on our website, you do get a really good picture of what we were able to claim to get to the affordable unit moratorium, because it's all right there. But it's everything we have to date. You know, there's a lot of units that we know if they were to come online and get CO'd, we would be able to get points for them. But we're a long way from another moratorium, I'm sorry to say.
We'll have to revisit them and look at the application, because the way that New Canaan's application read, they were getting credit for units that were approved, not yet built, occupied.
Well, I'd like to see that, because that is stuff we do have, and I always, you have to demonstrate a certificate of occupancy to get the credit, at least with the previous application. So things may have changed. I'd be glad to look at it.
Okay.
And Michelle, do they all require deed restriction?
Well, no, because you can get affordable units different ways. Like if you have a CHFA-funded mortgage, that counts as an affordable unit. So there's a chart. A lot of them are deed restricted, but there's also other ways where a community can get affordable units. So what I will do is I put together a memo not too long ago that kind of gave you a snapshot of where we are, what's approved, what that would get you for points, what you would need to be able to get another moratorium. Let me update that, and I'll give you the current listing, which will show you how South Windsor's 6.2% is calculated. It'll tell you how many are actual deed restricted units, how many are governmental units, how many are CHFA mortgages, so you can see how our breakdown happens.
And New Canaan's not at 10%. They're nowhere close to it. It's just that they're showing they're making progress.
Yeah, and that's what the whole goal of these 4-year moratoriums is, for those communities that are actually, you know, do diligently making more units as they move forward. So, yeah, no, be glad to look at that. Thanks.
And I think to the point that, do you know where New Canaan was as far as their percentage? Remember?
I think I think I gave them to you. They're like 4%.
So here we're at 6.2, and you know, we've had the presentation from Dr. Carter. We're an outlier. Like, we are the one community in the state of Connecticut. We are the only purple-colored one that is under the duress and stress and that should be considered for another moratorium based on what we have approved, you know, and whatever that formula says. I think there's an argument for our town council and our representatives to say, we need some help here, because, I mean, we need help here. You know, we are approving senior, but just that one person needs to come in and, you know.
The first thing I'd like us to do, if we can sit down and go through that and then see, are we accounting for everything in the way that New Canaan did, number one. Number two, in reading it, it looks like the application doesn't come from us. It comes from the town council is the one who needs to initiate it. At least that's the way New Canaan did it, so.
It comes from the town, like the town manager signed our application.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, any other old business?
Nope, not at this time.
I think we did want to remind the commission that I sent out an email a while ago about a training on March 22nd, I believe, from the Connecticut Bar Association.
We can resend it, and if anybody's interested, we'll sign
We're in
it.
a new year, new training requirements, Josh, is that right? And how
Yes.
many hours per person?
4.
4 hours.
We can resend the training requirement for you as well, so everybody can remind themselves.
Yeah,
So
that
we're
would-
all now at
They're all at
0.
zero.
Yeah, so you got to let us know as you do any training so that we can log it in. It would cover all your training requirements, I believe. Yeah, I believe it would, yeah. We'll re-forward it to everybody again. I think you can do it virtually too, maybe.
Okay. Well, it'd be appropriate to have a motion to adjourn at this point. Second, anybody?
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously.